Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, our guest is Golsa. Golsa is an Iranian-Canadian who is here to talk to us about not only her life growing up in Iran, but also her life currently now in Canada. Golsa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here.
Hi, Yasmine. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It is an absolute pleasure. You and I kind of met on a Twitter space where you spoke, and I was so impressed with what you had to say and how articulate you were, although it was a very emotional topic. And that's when I invited you to come on the podcast. And I'm really glad that we finally get to delve into more into detail into the things that we talked about in that Twitter space. So to start us off, let's start off with little Golsa growing up in Iran. Tell me, what was that like? Like, was your family religious? Do they know that you're an atheist now? What was it like just growing up as a woman in that country or growing up as a little girl?
hmm so my family was very complicated. My parents did adhere to religion, but they weren't forceful about it. They wouldn't like force me into anything. At the same time, like living, I think like in Middle Eastern culture in general, but also like Iranian culture specifically, the extended family has a big role to play in your life as well. Um, your lifestyle is basically um, dictated in a way by your extended family because they judge you, they
Yeah.
speak badly of you. So, because of that, my mom, who was very protective of us, and her family would be the more religiously judgmental type. She would basically try to make us like adhere to the rules of religion a little bit more. For example, I will wear at a certain age, like when I was a teenager, I would start wearing the hijab in front of my cousins and things like that.
Mm.
Or like I would fast and all that from a younger age. But on top of family, the society in general also just guided you to that direction. And right now it's different. In the past 10 years, things have changed massively in Iran in terms of the status of religion in Iran. But when I was there, like from school to media to people around you, everything would sort of like guide you towards religion in a way. So I really tried my best when I was young. I left Iran when I was 15 with my family. So up to that age, I really tried to like find my footing in religion, but I just couldn't. So like I would try different things. I would try to say prayers like the namaz, like in Farsi, so I could understand it, or like do things in my own way just to make it make sense. But it never did. And there was always like this sense of guilt as well, that like, oh, like maybe I'm lazy or maybe I'm not doing it right. But yeah, it just never made sense. And well, when I was 15 and I was in Turkey at the time, the ISIS war on Syrians began, and that was basically when I said goodbye to religion and any notion of God altogether.
Yeah. Well, that's very understandable. So you're talking about your mom's family and how you even had, I had to wear hijab in front of my cousins too, and I had to live with my aunt for 2 years in Egypt, and so I wore hijab 24/7. But that's my trauma.
I'm
But how did you, like when you were 15? I know you were in Turkey, so it's some obviously safer than coming out as an atheist in Iran, but still Turkey has its problems. But how
Mhm.
did your family react to that? How did your family or was your mom more open-minded, liberal thinker, and she was just sort of being controlled by her family in Iran? And now that you weren't in Iran anymore, it wasn't such a big concern?
Hmm. So m- my mom really just like, was very used to a certain type of mindset and like had grown up in a very specific setting. So she never forced me into anything. She would like give her opinion and be like, I disagree with this, or I think you should do that. But like she wouldn't like be that like forceful about it. So when I said that like I don't believe in any of this anymore, like she obviously wasn't pleased, but she also knew that I have my own mind and like I do not let them like decide for me. This is like something that also is good and bad in its own ways. Like sometimes like it doesn't help out that you don't listen to your parents, but in this instance, I think I made the right choice, and right now like my whole family like are sort of like non-believers. Like no one like believes even in God in that sense anymore. Like maybe there is like, still this conception of something being there, but not for myself. So yeah, it was just very interesting, and um, a lot of things happened that kind of made me go to this path because um, for example, like one thing about hijab is that well, like we start wearing hijab from 7 years old, and it's always like a struggle. But um, when I was 14, it was like the last year that we were in Iran, and I was actually fasting, and I was coming back from an English class, and it was like on one of these major streets in Tehran, and every time when I returned from class, I would look over the street to see if like on the crossroads the hijab patrol would be there. And
Mm.
this time it wasn't. So I was going on my regular path. And I was on the phone with my friend, and suddenly I saw a pair of eyes following me from behind the trees. And I realized that the police car is hiding behind the trees, and like it's greenish. So like it was kind of hiding. So I basically they arrested me on that day. It was a Ramadan day, so like me like
And you were
trying
14, you said?
I was 14,
Wow.
and my hijab even in their own rules had no problem. So it's very interesting. It's just that like I was still in a growing age, and like I had grown a little bit taller, so my mantu was a little bit shorter, but it wasn't that short, and I was wearing jeans behind under it. So and like it was funny because I had been warned about the sleeves of my mantle being too short, so I had even added sleeves so to not be in trouble. But yeah, they arrested me, and then I saw that like there were a couple of girls my age in the car as well, and then they just started like going through the city until the van was full of people, and it was like women
Wow.
from all ages. Yeah, it was women from all ages, like middle-aged, elderly, younger women, teenagers like us. Um, and it was just a very weird environment as well because the female officers would have this weird like desire in the way they approached us, like it just seemed like it was very weird. For example, like they would talk to some of the women and be like, "Oh, like where did you get your nose done? Where did you get your teeth done? Where did you get your fillers?" Things like that. Or they like took my sunglasses off and saw that I was wearing no makeup, and they're like, "Oh, you're a good girl. You're not even wearing makeup," and things like that. So it was just very weird because they were like they put this smile on and they were trying to appear friendly, um and it was
While they're
weird
arresting
because,
you.
yeah, because we were their captives. So it was just so weird that like it was like such a like a power move to them that they
Mm.
were saying like, even though you did these things or even though you look beautiful, you're our captive, or like something like that. It just seemed
Mhm.
really bizarre because they also, I think, like have a lot of desires that are not met. So it just kind of shows itself in the way they approach us. So yeah, that was basically when I decided that once I leave Iran, there's no way I'm gonna wear the hijab anymore. Like that was the end for me. Even if before that I had no problem with it,
Yeah.
because I had never like been in this
You knew
situation.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, after that I was like, there's just no way. It's just humiliation for me at this point if I am able to not wear it and then I wear it. Um, so
It,
yeah.
it's just interesting because they still haven't learned their lesson. Like they haven't realized that all of this, all of this control and their violence, it just has an opposite effect. I mean, you talked about you left the religion after ISIS. I left the religion after 9/11. You know
Mm,
what I mean? Like, and in Iran, the way they have their morality police forcing people to wear hijab, that's what made you take off the hijab. Like they're not realizing yet that their tactics of just controlling people like that is so short-sighted, you know, and
mhm.
it's going as soon as people have an opportunity to breathe, they're going to run away from you and your religion and everything, you know, leave it all behind.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was like for you, but for like it's very common in the Arab world that when they make us memorize Quran, it's
Mhm,
always in such a vicious manner, and it always includes a really like it always includes physical torture of some sort, you
mm.
know, whether it's making people stand in the corner with their arms up or whether they're actually just getting hit with sticks, you know, all sorts of different ways of torturing kids because you have to love Allah. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm gonna hate the Quran and I'm gonna hate your Allah and I'm gonna hate all of this. Like you're the one who's connecting your holy book with
Mm.
physical torture.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sort of like also told them, like it's just like all people who oppose me will burn in hell and
Yeah,
burn in
of
like this
course.
fire. So, like they are just told that this is the way. And it's also important to note, just because I know my fellow Iranians are gonna misunderstand me. I just want to note that with regards to Iran, there's just um no way that anything would change, what we are dealing with is not like this hijab policy or that like misogynistic role or this like weird like Islamic teaching. It's just a combination of things, and it's just not gonna be different or better as long as we have this government. Like there's just no way around it, because I see a lot of like feminists, whether many Iranian feminists as well, actually, they are kind of short-sighted when it comes to the um depth of the issue. They just like start talking about these woman-centered things, and it seems like if anything is a little improved, then like they have achieved a mission or something. But the fact is that with regards to policy change or legislation change, um, first of all, it's not possible because it would be contradictory to the actual nature of this government and an Islamic dictatorship. But on top of that, it's also important to note that there are sometimes policy changes and there are legislations being passed sometimes that are supposedly in our favor, but
Mhm.
they don't even adhere to it. Like it's like this government is not a legal government. They do not adhere even to their own messed up Islamic Sharia type of like constitution. And they just do it, like apply the bits that they want, and then they take some parts to the extremes as they want. So it's very important to realize that like we are dealing with like a group of bandits. We are dealing with a group of
Mhm.
um, terrorists who
Yeah.
abide by no rules. So nothing is gonna change them, and they are
Mhm.
not gonna change anything either. So
Mhm.
if we talk about our experiences, for me personally, if I talk about my experience of like, especially as a woman in Iran, it doesn't mean that if something gets improved for women, which it won't, but hypothetically speaking, then like things are fixed. No, like that's Iran is just not gonna be a normal country as long as we have this government in power. Yeah.
I totally agree with what you're saying, totally hear what you're saying. And the same is true, of course, for Afghanistan under Taliban or Gaza under Hamas. Like, when all of these terrorist
Exactly.
organizations, when they try to pretend that they're a government, it's exactly the way you described it. They're just a bunch of bandits, hodgepodge. They don't know how to actually run a country. They just know terrorism,
Exactly.
and you're absolutely correct. There is no answer. And this is a really good point, Golson. I'm glad you brought it up because you're too young to remember this, but in the 90s when Taliban were in Afghanistan before, and we saw that girls weren't going to school, we knew all of the horrible things that were happening, and then when the Taliban came back 20 years later, suddenly in our country of Canada, right? We had the Minister of Women and Gender, or whatever it was at the time. She's gone now, thankfully. But she called the Taliban are brothers, you
Yep.
know? And then you had our prime minister, and then also the prime minister of New Zealand, and so many of these world leaders talking about we're gonna break bread with the Taliban because now they want to be humanitarian. And it's like, have you lost your mind? What did you
Or
think was gonna 20 years ago? Like you were all, how did you forget? This isn't history. Like this is just the other day. Like you all know. Why do you think that they're going to have completely changed? So
yeah.
this negotiating with terrorists that the West loves to do, it's their favorite thing. I mean, look at Biden with the IRGC and of course Trudeau, you know what I mean? Like they don't want to admit, or they don't want to recognize, or they don't want to, I don't understand, but it's like their belief in humanity is to a stupid degree, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I think it's also, well, there is a lot of advantages for them as well, but it's again like not looking at the longer like future. Like it's just like very limited on the nose type of thing that like, oh, like this is beneficial for us right now in this in sense of
Yeah,
like this
always.
economic thing, and they just never realize how bad it could get. And
Hmm.
talking about like the minister, even like the European leaders of
Yeah.
the countries who like go to Iran, this woman with hijab on, and they talk with these
Mm.
terrorists again. It's just very interesting. And also, I think there's when we talk about an illegal government or sort of like a bunch of terrorists ruling over a country, and why we single out places like Iran and Afghanistan and Gaza, or like Yemen right now. The very important thing is that it's not just that there is a religious aspect, because, well, there are more countries that have that religious aspect, but it's that there's also no sense of a nation or
Yeah.
uh, like nationalism or national pride or country, like there's just no pride or love or interest or connection to the country itself. So it's very much the same as being colonized by a group. It's colonization, and it's just that they want to ideologically force people to adhere to something because that is what they believe their God dictates them to do, and nothing else matters. Nothing else matters to them. There is a difference between a government that puts the country first and a government that puts an ideology first. So that's why there's like this similarity between somewhere like Iran to somewhere like North Korea to Cuba, because there's no country interest. There's nothing for the people or for the history, for the culture. There's nothing, just like Khomeini said when he was entering Iran after many years being away from it, he felt nothing about going back to Iran. They asked him, how do you feel? And he said nothing, because there is just nothing in him about Iran. Iran wasn't the issue for him. Islam was. So like, their Revolutionary Guards is Islamic Revolutionary Guards. The government is Islamic Republic. So if they could erase the name of Iran altogether, they would. The only reason that they don't do it is, first, to give themselves legitimacy, and second, to actually change the meaning of this country and this history into something that it wasn't. And now barely anyone remembers what we were before the Islamic Revolution. Barely anyone even knows who Iranians are and what they think, because now we are all this blanket, like, Middle Eastern country that loves their oppression because they are all like Muslims, and they don't want to even criticize Islam and offend Islam, like, it's just also the way that we are viewed, right? That we can't even talk about our own oppression anymore because it's offensive. So they have been very successful.
I want to get there, and that's a very important point and a good segue into my next question. But before we go there, I want to comment on what you said about about your country being colonized by Muslims, and that's very true, and that's true for 57 countries across the world. Losing their culture, losing their language, losing their traditions, losing so much. But I have to give a shout out to the Iranians that held on to their culture. I mean, right now we're celebrating Nowruz. Happy Nowruz. Like, people still remember. Egypt has forgotten. Egypt is Africa, and we call ourselves the Arab Republic of Egypt. What do you have to do with the Arabs? You know what I mean? Like, we've been so colonized that we forgot who we ever were. And in Tunisia and in Algeria and in Morocco, they have like this, now they're trying to have like bring back the memories of their pre-Islamic cultures before they were colonized, and so they're going back and they're trying to find historical stories about who their leaders were and even what their language was. So, the Amazigh people in those areas are really doing a lot of work to try and bring back their cultures. But Iranians did a really great job of keeping it, even though, of course, you were, like you said, the Islamic regime superseded Iran always and still does. The people I have to commend for hanging on to their roots and not losing themselves the way the rest of us did. I mean, it's the way some people even are currently. Indonesia and Malaysia, we're watching it happen in real time, where people in those countries are being told, if you dress in your cultural clothing, or even if you, like you said, namaz when you were speaking, even people from India, if they were to say namaz, they're like, no, 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 we don't say namaz, we say salat. You know, like you can't even use your own words anymore, or from
Right.
Afghanistan or from Iran. So it's like just not just an Islamization, but an Arabization as well that gets
Mm.
spread over all of these countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
The
just a little
erasure.
shout out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Erasure, yeah, go ahead.
No, there's just like this erasure of like our identities altogether, and like we are not even allowed to talk about it. We are not like, like
Mm,
for myself, even like this was a learning experience, like I never like I didn't like start off being like, oh yeah, like Arabs colonized us, blah blah blah,
yeah,
This is just like in even like in our own communities there's like this division type of thing, like especially like the more left you go, the more um prohibited it is to talk about these things
yeah,
because they start like calling you a fascist or like a nationalist or like a neo-Nazi and things like that because you're talking about like your national identity, your cultural identity. Like I used to wear the Farbahar necklace, like a pendant on my neck, and when I was here, I had some like Iranian leftist friends, and they would always make fun of it, and they would like make a
oh,
point
I
of,
thought you meant
oh,
like
like,
Canadian leftists. I didn't even realize you
no,
meant
even
actual Iran.
Iranians,
Oh
like this
no.
ideology of like this leftist ideology just like makes people brain dead in a sense because like I'm talking about why is it super hip and woke and interesting to talk about all these like cultures in Canada or like in all around the world that the British Empire, for example, colonized. But then when we want to talk about our culture that was colonized, then we are like these backwarded nationalists who like don't understand the concept of time and history and how
Wow.
cultures intertwine and how cultures impact each other. Like when it comes to us, then it's no longer a matter of colonization and it's us not understanding what cultural exchange means. But this was never about exchange. It was about force, like from 1400 years ago. It has been about force, about just the burning our libraries and
Mm.
slaughtering people in Iran. And for example, like I must say yes as well, unfortunately. And I always talk about it in the sense that I am like the offspring of the women who were raped by Arab colonizers. Like I
Mm.
don't consider I don't consider it like a religious type of like title to be proud of, but I also am not ashamed of it in a way that many Iranians are or dislike it just because it means that you have a connection to Arab colonizers because there are a lot of people who don't like Sayas just because of that. But for myself, in my eyes, it's just that there were women there who
Mm.
uh, were forced to give birth to these people's children. And why don't we talk about it? Why don't we talk about us existing and why we exist at all and how violent the history is and why is it not woke or not progressive to talk about colonization in other areas? And why do people think that only white people are capable of colonizing others or causing harm to
Mm.
others? It's also like racist in its own way that you think like brown people or whatever you think you'd like to imagine us as um are incapable of harm, like incapable
Mhm.
of like
Yeah.
violence, incapable of doing anything bad without a British intervention or a Western sort of agenda. No, we
Mhm.
existed way before, and we were dealing with ourselves way before, and this is the result right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's just it's such a I don't know what else to call it other than a mind fuck, really. Like it's just so convoluted and confusing and weird because when the leftists in the West act like that, I can understand it because I can see it from their perspective of we're not allowed to criticize other cultures. The West is bad and wholly bad, white people are bad. Like this is what they have been taught, right? They they look at things from that very simplistic narrative. They don't know anything about Arab colonization. They don't know anything about the Arab slave trade, like
And they
they're just
don't want to know.
uneducated.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't
And
want to
if
know
you
either.
try,
Yeah,
you're right. They don't want to know because if you try to tell them, they don't want to hear it and they act in the ways that you were just describing, where they're just like either trying to deflect or defend or whatever. Like they're just going to find some way to slither out of that conversation. But of course, if you want to talk about British colonization, then they're all over that conversation, right?
yeah. It's just
But
because
it's,
of their guilt, like they have this sense of guilt
yes,
about like their history of racism, and then they project that onto us. But no, like our histories are different. You have your
yeah,
own guilt to deal with, but I don't have to deal with your guilt. I come from a place that was colonized by the British, that was colonized by the Arabs. I can talk about all of them, and like it's
yeah,
none of their business. But no, they are
yeah.
so guilty that they are uncomfortable to even let us speak, because as soon as we speak, they have like all these complexes to deal with, this savior complex to deal with, and
Hmm.
this like history to deal with. So they just rather shut us down altogether instead of dealing with their own issues.
You're absolutely correct. And they only want to see things from their perspective, and that's it. Other perspectives are just irrelevant to them.
Exactly.
Um, Now I want to talk about your transition to Canada because I assume when you first came to Canada, you must have felt like I can finally talk about everything. In Iran, so many things are restricted. You can't talk about anything you whisper in your house. You know what I mean? But you think, oh, I'm in free Canada now. I can have all the conversations I want, um, have all of the, political discourse, free expression, free speech. And then I assume you must have had a bit of a rude awakening when you realized that that's actually not what's happening in Canada. Um, so
Uh,
I don't know in what detail you want to talk to us about that experience or tell us about the culture shock or just tell us about like your transition coming into Canada, how it was in the beginning and how it is now.
for sure. Well, in terms of like the freedoms, it has sort of like dawned on me because I have been in Turkey for 2 years. So like it was just like having lived in a little bit of a freedom because we were also refugees, so we were protected. And that was when it was all by UNHCR. So it wasn't like Turkey handling everything, because
Ah,
right now that
okay.
Turkey is handling everything is pretty like sketchy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
refugees are not safe anymore.
Yeah.
But back then we were protected to a certain degree. Um, so to be completely honest, when I came here, well, first, like I was just invited to speak about that refugee experience. Like this refugee identity was what mattered a lot to them. And then um, I started talking about like my migrant experience, like being in Canada and how that feels. And that wasn't very appreciated because like they just wanted to hear this sob story rather than
Right.
hearing any constructive criticism. But the one thing that I struggle with to this day is the fact that, like until the age of like 18, I was pretty much the same as before. Like I was following a certain mindset with regards to the government in Iran. I was like super against it, and I knew exactly what needed to be changed and all these things. But as I mentioned, those leftist friends of mine, um, just being in contact with them and like sort of having them close and having them influence my mindset, that was like a disaster for me personally, because it really made me believe that, oh, maybe like things can improve, or maybe there is a way. Deep down, still, I had my very certain notion of the government. For example, like when the elections came in 2017, my friends were like, oh, we gotta vote because like this is better than that. And for me, it was just that, like, if there's an election and then these reformists don't win, then they will never shut up about what could have been done if they had won. So they will
Mhm.
forever, like just like the Ahmadinejad era, they will forever talk about that golden opportunity if like they wouldn't like have another opportunity to extend their rule, because like Rouhani was there for 4 years, but then they were saying Ahmadinejad had fucked up so much that 4 years is not enough to clean that up. So anyway, no excuse. So for me, like a 2 year period of just hanging out with Iranian leftists, not even I mean, I did hang out with like migrants in here as well, and they had a lot of issues as well. But um just dealing with them made me sort of question my own beliefs and question my own understanding of the government that I had been pepper sprayed by at the age of like 13 or 12. And I had dealt with very up close, like I just questioned it. And I thought maybe like my understanding is limited. Maybe I am like too pessimistic. So, and to this day, like I need to respond about that 2 years of just losing my way just because I was influenced. And on top of that, an issue is that in the activist circles here, which I was very involved in activist communities that are for migrant justice and things like that, um, that also influences you, right? That makes you uh, get into this whole thing about all like the, I don't know, evil right wing and all these policies against migration and this and that. And it just like this very realistic type of situation becomes very theoretical and very much about like uh just very personal, while there are logistics, there are issues to take into consideration other than your own benefit and uh, your own advantages. There are things to take into account when talking about migration, when talking about policy change. It's not just about what you would like. It's not a dystopian,
Mhm.
society. So, for
Mhm.
example, with regards to migration, which is a big selling point for leftists, and it's always what they make, especially the migrant communities, fear that oh, migration is gonna be limited, and they're not gonna allow foreigners in, and because they are racist. That's not the only reason, like maybe they are racist. I'm not gonna say they're not. There, many of them are. But there are things to take into account. So, for example, we are in Canada, and Trudeau just opened the way to this flow of immigrants and refugees. And well, I am a refugee, and exactly that the migrant experience that I was talking about was this as well. That okay, I come here, my parents don't speak English, and who is going to support them? What's going to happen to them? Am I going to be supporting them? Am I going to be the parent of the family? There's no support. There's no like, there aren't many jobs available for them. There aren't enough schools here. There's not enough housing. It's not even affordable to live here. So,
Yep.
there's all
That's what we
this,
do. We bring in way more people than our infrastructure can handle. It's not smart,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
it looks good when you're if you want to get voted in again, right? You can drop all these
Exactly.
we brought tens of thousands of this and tens of thousands of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like just appealing to people's emotions regarding these things, including my own when I was younger, really worked. So really made me like make wrong choices or like have an opinion that wasn't fully logical or like have this like illogical fear of like other opinions. There's just like this bubble that people create that you're not even allowed to get out of it if like you're
Yeah.
not even allowed to expose yourself to a different thing. And I was in
Mhm.
it too. So when you ask me about my experience coming here, it was just like very complicated, and there were all of these new things. And like now that we are dealing with the situation in Palestine, let's say, well, I was already like there was a lot of influence from the government in Iran over like how you would
Mhm.
view the situation in Palestine, and there was propaganda all over the place all the time. And I was never like really interested in the matter either, so I never did any research truly. I just was hearing things and I was like, okay, there's like this situation going on. But then, uh, you know, at least like when you hear it from your dictatorship that lies a lot and things like that, there is a difference. And then you come here and in the activist
Right.
circles and in the academic circles and all these places in this evil West that was supposedly the exact opposite of the government in
Mm.
Iran, they are saying the same thing. So when you come here as like a teenager, you're like, oh, so maybe it wasn't a lie. So you're like impacted by it.
Mm.
You're like, maybe not everything that this government said was a lie. If these academics and these experts are all talking about this, then maybe it's true. Maybe that is what's going on. And uh, that's it. Like that's how easy it is that they can like
Yeah.
change your viewpoint. That's what they do with regards to Islamization of different countries as well. Like for example, in academia, there was just always this things about like the white savior complex and things like that. There's a lot of academic literature on it, and
Mhm.
Orientalism, things like this,
Mhm.
Edward Said, all of this, like they would just
Yeah.
make you question your own
Yeah.
experience by saying that you are calling yourself a victim while you're not, and that's what white people made you think. But like it's like really a mind fuck, as you said. And
Mhm.
yeah, so for me, when I was younger, especially because I'm a very curious person and I'm also very outspoken, it was a very challenging time to be like surrounded in that atmosphere, um, and sort of like being afraid of living that as well, because like there's a sense of community, there is a sense of like belonging in there that I no longer have. Like I no longer really have any friends here. I no longer am active in any type of activist space. I'm not even pursuing my master's in political theory because I was going to York, which is the
Oh
most
gosh.
leftist university in Canada.
Enough
So
said.
So,
Yeah.
like there's this isolation right now, and there's this sense of like not having a community anymore. But I prefer that over what I was like in that,
You were in a cult, basically.
yeah, exactly, in that 2 3 year period when I was afraid to even have a conversation with someone who had a different opinion.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that is the experience. That is the culture shock. The shock, I
Yeah.
think, is more like how much the ideology of the government has transferred into Canada with
So
the
sad.
RRGC. Yeah.
So, so sad. So embarrassing. So heartbreaking. Uh, so many of
Sorry,
us in
that was a
Canada.
very long response. I'm sorry.
No, it was very informative. It's really important to hear these things. You know, we living in Canada, we kind of watch these kinds of things happen in slow motion, but it's quite jarring for you to have to have that realization, you know what I mean? Like, oh, the more things change, the more they stay the same, basically.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's terrible. But you're right, what you are doing now, which is even, you know, to be able to be free in your own mind and to be able to say what you want to say and think what you want to think and question what you want to question. I mean, none of us have all the answers, you know what I mean? But to be able to have different conversations with different people and not feel like you have to police your language and police your thoughts and police your circle of friends and all of like it's just so much pressure. And it the reason why I said it's like a cult is because it was exactly the way it was for me when I was growing up Muslim, because I grew up in such a religious environment. And it's kind of what you were describing with your family and how they were all kind of everybody's keeping an eye on each other, everybody's policing each other. And then you had literally the morality police policing you. So it's kind of, you know, it's obviously not as extreme, but it's so familiar. Like you're gonna feel the similarities between that because you've experienced it before. And so you had to escape it like twice kind of thing. And
Yeah,
you know, I was in an interview yesterday where I was kind of explaining that I grew up so fundamentalist, basically right-wing conservative, that I ran to the left, you know, so
exactly.
fast. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I was just like, I'm here, I'm free, I'm with you now. Like, this is where I belong. And then
Yeah,
it's such a shock to the system. It feels like such a betrayal. And you really feel like, at least running from there to here, it made sense. Like it felt like you were going somewhere. But then when the left betrayed me the way they did, I was like, where do I go now? Like, now
exactly.
what do I do? Like,
Yeah,
that's it.
it's
There's nowhere else to run. Like I have no safe space. I have no place where I can feel I belong and, you know, that doesn't exist anymore. That old school idea of liberalism where you can have conversations with people to the point where you completely disagree with each other and have these heated arguments and then have a drink later, you know, like that doesn't exist anymore. Now, if you disagree with somebody, it's because they're a Nazi.
yeah,
Like there's
because
no
their morals are questionable. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. There's no middle ground. There's no nuance to the conversation.
yeah,
There's no let's see things from a different perspective. Like it's just not allowed anymore in our country.
yeah,
And it's so sad that I mean, obviously York has a really bad reputation, but a lot of our universities across Canada and across America, it's the same thing. And
yeah,
universities are supposed to be a place for critical thinking. You're supposed to be discussing the most, you know, just whatever. This is the place for it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? This is the
Not
place to
anymore.
explore. Not anymore. Absolutely not. You have to be so careful. Class discussions were just like, I felt like I was like in China. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like all the
exactly.
students are like afraid to talk. I'm like, listen, there's nobody's recording you. We don't have any facial recognition software. Just speak your mind. But nope, they cannot
It,
anymore.
it was honestly such a disaster, especially like after I became like in the past 3, 4 years, I became like way more connected to the activists in Iran. So that really shaped my understanding of things, and that really took me out of that stupid bubble I
Good.
was in. And I'm really happy that that happened. That no matter how many costs I had, how much cost I had to pay for it. But exactly the thing that you're describing, like we would be sitting in like a classroom discussion, like a presentation type of thing, and out of nowhere someone would use the example of Afghanistan and woman like wearing the burqa or not wearing the burqa, and how like that was irrelevant and how that was a cultural thing. like all of nowhere. And like my friend from Afghanistan and
Mm.
I would be sitting in that classroom and we would be like, where did that come from? Why did you think that you need to bring that in? And like we would talk about how like you don't have to speak on it if you don't know what's going on.
Yes.
And then like this white dude would out of nowhere come into the discussion and be like, I don't know what it's like to suffer in Palestine, but I am with like the Palestinian people in their struggle against occupation. Now I would be like, exactly, you made my point. Why you shouldn't
Yeah.
like speak on the issue if you don't know what's going on? You know, like it was always like it
Yeah.
was just so exhausting to be in that atmosphere, and then like also like have have professors who were not willing to hear
Yeah.
what you have to say. Like if you like criticize their favorite thinker or you didn't fully agree with it, they just would question your intelligence and question your depth of understanding and question your education altogether. It was just
Yeah.
like anxiety inducing, and it's so funny how like they have these like I don't know, support systems and mental health, blah blah blah,
Hmm.
advocacy, but then like they make you like shamble
Yeah.
um, when you question them. So for me, it was just like like I finished my courses, but then I was like, though these papers I'm gonna write, someone's gonna grade them, and I just
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
if I have the capacity for it to just like be run over because I think differently. And someone
Hmm.
asked about like how I came to understand that the whole Palestine thing was a lie. So I'm gonna respond to that here too. It was because of academia. Because I was gonna write a paper on nationalism and how like we were reading different books, and one of the books that we read was Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, and that book I think like resonates a lot with the situation in Iran, and like he does advocate for like a sense of nationalism for those who are colonized and why that is necessary for them to overcome the situation they're in. And that was basically my point of like why like Iran needs that, and why Iranians because of how their national identities sort of erased or attempted to be erased need to stick to it in order to overcome religious colonization. So that was my point. And this professor who would always hang this poster of Marx behind her, uh,
Mm.
she insisted that okay, Fanon is not always right. You know, like they are always like telling you to read them, and then like when you make your own point out of it, they're like, not that. No, that's not that part. Or just go back. And that was like her whole situation. She was like, "Oh no, read this other book too." And she made me read this other book, and I actually didn't read the whole thing because it was disastrous in my opinion. It was a book called Home Rule, and I think the author was Nandita Sharma, something like that, and she basically wanted to talk about how nationalism is bad and how the concept of borders is ridiculous. And she was like against all types of nationalism. She was against Palestinian nationalism, against just any, not, it doesn't matter. Indigenous nationalism didn't matter to her. But then the way she brought these examples and how she described them just didn't make sense to me. So like I didn't have a lot of information about Palestine, but I knew about Rwanda. I had studied Rwanda a lot, so I knew exactly what happened in Rwanda. And um, this woman just made Rwanda to be like a war of like nationalism and a war about like that she just made it out to be something that wasn't. Rwanda
She
was never about,
oversimplified it.
yeah,
Mm.
it was never about like a sense of a nation. It was all about how they were not a nation. So, like
Hmm.
it was the exact opposite. If they had that sense of unity as a nation, they would not have killed each other. So she just like made it something that wasn't. And I was like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So I went and did research on all the other examples that she brought in. So I up to that date, I thought like the Myanmar situation was what it was said to be, or like the Bosnia situation. You know, like I have my own understanding just because of the things that I had been told, and I hadn't really done research on it. And then I did. I was like, okay, that's not like every time there's a conflict with Muslims, they have initiated it. Like that's never been the opposite. It's never been that like Muslims were being peaceful. No, like if there was like the war in Yugoslavia, Muslims were
Mhm.
primarily responsible. In Myanmar, they were primarily responsible. In Palestine, they were the ones who kept attacking Israel. So,
Mhm.
it just that was the turning point for me. And I have not written that paper yet, but
Mhm.
the research alone, I think, really woke me up from a lot of like misinformation that I had just heard from mainstream media. I hadn't really done any research in. And that actually ties to my experience right now as well, because I had made a thread about exactly this in Farsi, about this whole book and how I came to understand what the Palestine situation is. And there was like a comment section that we were talking about how Muslims just screw things up. And I actually like those comments alongside a bunch of my other Farsi posts were reported to my workplace. And I was investigated for Islamophobia at my workplace. So yeah, fun fact.
Crazy.
Which was what we talked about on the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you told them I was born and raised Muslim in the Islamic Republic, like, and I am being muzzled. I am being smeared with the Islamophobia. Like, how did you? My response would have been, it's not an irrational fear. This is a very rational fear that I have. And you can talk about what life was like for you living under Islam, but I just can't believe it. It's like um, when they call me a white supremacist. And
Yeah.
it's the same kind of thing. And it's like, what? That's what it feels like when they call you Islamophobic. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, who in this world has more of a right to speak up against this religion than those of us who have suffered under it?
Yeah.
And then they send you. So it was okay. So tell us about this. So it was reported to
Yeah.
your work. I just cannot even, Golsa. This is just crazy.
It was reported to my workplace. Well, we don't know exactly who reported it, but I have my idea, and it was not someone who was concerned like about like any of this. It was totally a personal vendetta
Yeah,
against me.
that's how it is
Um,
usually. Yeah.
so yeah, so it was reported, and I had also like talked about like just, I mean, I'm not gonna excuse this. I had talked about how like because I was working in the government and I should not have said this. I'm gonna make this very clear that this was not the thing, but I still stick to my Islamophobia. Um, the I had talked about how like with every like Muslim case that we have there, it's gonna like take time as much as like 10 families because they're just reproduce a lot. And I had talked about that, and it was very much about just like how they are forced to do it in a way because it's like a cultural thing too. And like a woman would be my age and she would have 5 children. That's just not like doesn't make sense. So I had talked about that, and then there was also my other conversations regarding Islam and Muslims, and I'm not a fan of Muslims. So all of those were reported to my workplace, and then I was suspended over uh, hateful conduct, and breach of privacy because I talked about like many like Muslim cases having so many children. So there was a security investigation to determine whether or
Wow.
not I should keep my reliability status and whether or not I'm like a security risk to them. That took about a month, and I passed the security investigation. So they decided that I can keep my reliability status, and I'm not a risk security wise. But then they gave their findings to my manager, and then they read my tweets and what I had said, and the whole investigation, all of the interviews that were done by the investigator. And before they were done reading it and deciding what to do, well, they told me to come back to work. Basically, they sent me my laptop and stuff, and gave me like 20 trainings to do. There were trainings about like diversity and inclusion and like how to deal with queer people and like what
Just
is Islamophobia?
everything. Just pick a
Yeah,
card,
everything.
any card.
And they
Like,
also gave me a lot of like other like administrative type of courses because they were like, we would probably not trust you to work on the front line with the clients anymore, but we will get you to do administrative work. Well, like in my professional work, like in my professional conduct, I had never expressed my views. I had never like
yeah.
done
This is
anything,
what I was
and
going
I
to
had.
ask you. So this Twitter feed that you're talking about, that was not connected to your work in any way, shape, or form. You were just Golsa the
I had,
individual.
yeah, and I had said that I worked at the
Mm.
I worked with migrants. I wasn't even a specific,
But it
but
wasn't like an account
no,
from
I
the
had
workplace.
no,
Hmm.
no. So anyway, and then like in the last interview that I had with them, they were like, you said like they had read the interviews that were done before, and they were like, what exactly are you sorry about? Because like you said that you've been unjustly framed and things like that. So what are you sorry about? And I was like, I'm sorry that like I in any way like made anything related to the government, that I said anything related to the government, or I made any point that made me connected to the government. But I'm not sorry about my opinions because they're my opinions and that's my lived
Hmm.
experience, and it just doesn't make sense for me to have any other. Um, and then basically I asked them, um, like you say that I'm not allowed to appear as partisan in that sense either, and I should like be non-partisan in all ways because I that wasn't my understanding, that I can't even have a side in terms of my own lived experience. I thought that's about political parties. But if you say that, like, what about like if there's nothing, like not on my LinkedIn, nothing that I work in the government, can I still express myself with my name? And they were like, you can't say anything because
Wow.
you can't say anything that would make you appear as partisan or whatever, because you are basically they can still find out whether or not you work in the government. And I was like, okay, and I was ready to quit because I thought
Hmm.
if they gave me administrative courses, they probably want to keep me, but well, they fired me, thankfully. So it was a very interesting experience because it really made me realize, again, going back to that migrant policy thing, that when you bring in all these refugees, all these people from these different backgrounds, when you bring me in as a refugee, and then you bring someone like a Shia escaping Sunni oppression, and then you
Hmm.
bring them here. Do you expect us to
Just,
forget
yeah. Yeah.
forget what happened? Do you expect us to like erase our memories of trauma? Like when you bring me
Hmm.
here, and then you bring IRGC members here as
Hmm.
migrants. or like as investors, you know, like when we are all living in here together, it's literally like the Handmaid's Tale. Like the Handmaid's
Yeah.
Tale, where like the handmaids are in Canada, and it's in Canada too. The handmaids are in
Mm-hmm.
Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and their literal like enslavers are also in Canada. And what are they gonna do? Like, how are they gonna deal with that? And what do you expect us to do? Like, am I to not have a life, like not have a personality, not have a history, a brain? Like, am I to become a robot? Just like, do you think about it? Like, when you talk about diversity, inclusion, blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
are we also included in it? Because
Yeah.
like it doesn't seem like it. And you know, like I was well, our union reps weren't very supportive, like, and it took me weeks to even find a union representative to talk
They're
to.
useless.
Like no one was even in touch with me. So I finally found one, and I was talking with this person, and they were basically just like supporting that side, and they were like, oh well, like blah blah blah, you shouldn't like blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, you say that maybe like a Muslim man or whatever approaching me in as a clerk of the government, they would feel that I'm not like an open person, and I'm not a safe person to talk to. All right. When an Iranian woman, which right now we have a lot of Iranian women as refugee claimants here after the
Mm-hmm.
2022 um, protests. So when they come here and they are dealing with the government, they approach us and they see a woman wearing the hijab, being the government clerk,
That's right.
approaching them. Is that woman gonna feel safe and accepted and heard?
Yeah. Is
And
this
if
a two-way street? Mm-hmm.
exactly, like I am okay with it. You wanna fire me, you wanna do whatever, all right. But
Mm-hmm.
is it gonna be the same thing for that woman and for the hijabi
Mm-hmm.
woman? Or are they okay? If you put
Mm-hmm.
me into diversity and inclusion classes, if you teach me how to deal with queer people, why I myself am queer,
Mm-hmm.
are you gonna put a Muslim person into that training as well because they very proudly declare that they follow a religion that prosecutes gay people? Like, is it
Mm-hmm.
gonna be the same?
Mm-hmm.
But there would never be a response, and there would never be
We
a
know the
willingness.
response. Yeah.
Yeah, they're silence. It's just silence. They just don't care, and they just don't even understand what they were sort of like advocating or championing in the first place. Like, what is oppression anymore? Like,
Mm.
what does it even mean anymore to you? Is it like your discomfort, or is it our lived
Yeah.
experience? Is it
Mm-hmm.
whatever the media tells you?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I like, if we are gonna go with that staircase of oppression type of thing, and like, you know, the privilege cards, why am I, as a woman of color,
Yep.
someone who like deals with
Refugee.
mental health issues, a refugee,
Mm-hmm.
a queer person,
Queer. Yeah, you got so
coming
many.
coming from a working class family,
Yeah.
why am I the villain here? Why am I the
Mm-hmm.
oppressor right now? Like, because I
Mm-hmm.
have a because I have trauma, like what's next? You're gonna prosecute, I don't know, indigenous people for talking about like the British Empire? Because like that's the same thing.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that was this is that's the subtitle of my book right there, you know, how Western liberals empower radical Islam, because that's what their stupidity does.
Yeah.
That perfect little parallel example that you gave them about the woman in hijab, because of course they have no problem with that, right? So they have no problem upholding, supporting, and empowering extremist Muslims and
Mhm.
extremist Islam. But when it's those who speak out against it, those are the people who are demonized. And I'll give you another parallel, which you already know to be true. If this was Christianity, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Somehow, when it's Christians, it's like they can see their eyes work and their brains work all of a sudden and they get it, then they're like, okay, well, no, extremist, fundamentalist Christianity, that's a problem, right? Not speaking up against it is the problem. You know what I mean? Like if somebody was escaping Uganda, for example, where they want to kill homosexuals and coming to Canada, and if they start speaking up against that government, then that's going to be okay. But if you're going to talk about escaping Afghanistan or Iran or Saudi Arabia or Qatar or one of the 15 countries that will execute you, Islamic Muslim majority countries that will execute you for being a homosexual, that is not allowed.
Yeah,
That
you're
is,
just like,
you know,
you're just allowed as the face to be added to their mosaic of diversity. You're not allowed to have a brain.
shut
You're
your
not
mouth,
allowed
but
to,
just be
yeah,
there pretty. Yeah.
yeah. Just sit there and represent our diversity. But
Yeah.
diversity is not about the different opinions. Diversity is
No.
not about different experience. Diversity is only about different skin tones. That's it.
Yes.
That's all. And
Yeah.
like whether or not someone is wearing a hijab on your posters. Uh,
Perfectly said. That's exactly what it is. It's all just virtue signaling. None of it has any substance. Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have a message for Canadians? Like, is there something that you wish you could, if we have Canadians that are listening to this that maybe are just for the first time hearing this and they never really understood or realized why, because they think being Islam, speaking up against Islamophobia is a good thing. That's what they were taught. And so they're listening to you right now and they're feeling themselves confused. So let's pretend you're speaking to your peers at York University. What is it that you want them to know? What is it that you want them to understand? What is it that they're getting wrong?
Whoa. What
Yeah.
is it that they're not getting wrong? Would be a shorter list. Uh, um, okay, to make it like very respectful, I just like I want them to step out of themselves. Like the world does not revolve around you, and you're not as important as you think you are. Um, your discomfort does not define reality. Your discomfort with the truth does not define whether or not it's the truth. So like if people have lived experiences and they are so generous that they want to share it with you, because it's not fun to talk about. It is not fun to talk about our traumas. It's not fun to talk about what we have gone through. And I know that you guys know it because when you are being super wokish, you talk about the emotional labor that Black people need to put in order to talk to you about racism, or the emotional labor of blah, blah, blah. And we also are human beings, and that is emotional labor for us too, even if it's not the type of thing that you would like to hear. So if someone is willing to talk to you about it, because it's a very bloody history and it's a very bloody present to talk about. You don't want to follow the news, you don't want to listen, you don't want to see what's going on, but very real people are being killed as we speak, by Islamists. Very real people are suffering, very real people are in prison, or are in fear of persecution, are being executed, are shot in the head during protests. Women have been killed for literally sitting in the car filming the protests. The people have been killed for passing the street during the protests. These are protests over ideology. The protests over an Islamic dictatorship. Like maybe in the previous years, you could brush it off and be like, this is an economic thing, this is a blah, blah, blah. But after Masa Amini, you can't say that because the protest erupted after a woman was killed over her hijab. Not allegedly, not anything. She was killed over her hijab. And the protest, the maybe biggest protest that we've seen in many years, erupted right there in support of that woman, and that said enough about what type of a protest it was and what it was over and how much against the ideology it was. So when we want to talk to you about it, after hearing the news of our loved ones being imprisoned, after hearing the news of our neighbors being killed, we still have the capacity to tell you what's going on. You are obligated to listen. Like, I'm not gonna say please listen. I'm not gonna say like you're doing us a favor to listen. If you're going to talk about these things, if you're going to be so vocal, if you're going to call yourself an activist, if you're going to call yourself a feminist, you have to listen to us. You can't lecture us about what's going on in our own lives by reading Judith Butler. Judith Butler never lived in Iran. Judith Butler has no idea. Foucault went to Iran on a trip. He's not an authority. Whatever ideological type of thinker you would like to follow, they don't know. Your books don't tell our lived experiences. Your books are massively censored. Your books are very, very ideological. Your books are essentially propaganda. They are propaganda pieces that support our government, that support our oppression. When you read that some sort of oppression of women in Afghanistan or women in Iran or people in general in these countries is a cultural thing and we don't need to discuss that because it's no, you're being racist. By trying to be anti-racist, you are being racist by talking about it as these subjects that culturally find it comfortable to be oppressed, to be murdered, to be stoned, to be executed, to be raped and then executed, to be all this. That is not our culture. It's never been our culture. Like, even if Islam was our traditional culture, that would never be okay with us, you know, like even if like that was the whole history of Iran, we would never be okay with being killed because some god said so. But it's not even ours to begin with. Like, we were colonized. You need to make yourself comfortable with talking about how Muslims colonized like half of the world at some point. They went all through to Europe, and then like they were all in the Middle East and West Asia, and they were everywhere. So if you are like uncomfortable with that, this is your problem. We are not gonna change history. We are not gonna change our lived experiences. We are not gonna like just be visual representation of your tolerance because you're not being tolerant at all. Like, this is not tolerance to force us to accept what you say or force us into silence or force us into trying our best not to discomfort you. It's just like it's not our job to make you feel comfortable about yourselves. And whatever view you have on diversity, whatever view you have on colonialism, whatever history you have here, that has nothing to do with the rest of the world. Like, yes, British imperialism existed. Yes, racism exists. Yes, all of these things. But then again, these things existed before that and after that, and they're ongoing, and that is the fact of the matter. Like, we cannot just change facts to make you feel better about yourselves. And also to like stop like thinking that in a discussion, like in a back and forth about something that we disagree on, if you just keep saying, oh, you can't be right because neo-Nazis also say that, that's first of all like a logical flaw. It's not how to win an argument. Maybe it's your problem that a neo-Nazi is using our points in their own favor, and you're so deaf that you don't want to even hear it. You don't want to even like, you block it out. Maybe if you listened, you could use our points in a conversation with that neo-Nazi and then make the neo-Nazi look bad. But no, you don't even listen to us. So the neo-Nazi can easily make our, like, use our experiences to then make you look bad or to humiliate you in a conversation or to, I don't know, win an argument. It's your problem that you're letting that happen. It's your problem that you're just sliding so far away from facts that fundamentalist fascists are appearing more logical than you. Like, it's your problem. Because they should have been, the fundamentalist fascists should have been on the side that they are, like the government in Iran, like that they are fundamentalist fascists, and those who want to persecute anyone over their identity, their biological identity, they're all the same. So if you're appearing to be in favor of one in any shape or form, you're letting them win, and you're the problem. So just like step away from that bubble and try to educate yourselves. Try to educate yourselves non-academically, because people have so much to say. Like, if you actually listen, there is just so much to say. And that's what worked for me personally, to understand how delusional I was starting to become. And it will work for you as well. And stepping out of your echo chamber is not gonna be your death. You're not gonna disappear from the world if you just start questioning it. It's gonna be lonely and hard, and you're gonna lose support, and you're gonna lose a lot of things, and you're gonna see a lot of hypocrisy, just like I did when my feminist friends were all silent during the Mahsa Amini protest. But still, if you claim that you're in favor of human rights, you're in favor of people, you're in favor of justice, you're in favor of progress, then you need to put your word into action as well. It's not just enough to pat yourself on the back for like reading a brown poet's book. That's not gonna make you educated about our lives at all.
Wonderfully
That's
said. Beautifully said. That's good. I'm sure you could keep going, but that's 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 a good concise some good concise advice to give them. And I think what you said, I'm just going to sort of reiterate the part that when you were talking about the comfort, right? Because I think that we're so spoiled in the West that we're so uncomfortable with, we have to be comfortable with discomfort. We have to be. That's how we grow, and that's kind of what we were talking about in the university classrooms. You have to feel discomforted when you hear these differing opinions. They have to break through these narratives that you've had, or these biases that you have, That's how you grow. That's how progress happens. It's through that discomfort. It's through breaking through that cognitive dissonance. And if people are just so obsessed with being comfortable all the time, then they're never going to grow. So that's just the sad reality. If you want to grow and if you want to progress, then you're going to have to be comfortable with discomfort. And like you said, Golsa, there's going to be a lot of, obviously, there's going to be so many bumps in the road. There's going to be a lot of discomfort, but you will maintain your integrity. And at the end of the road, you will be proud of yourself, you know, because you didn't shut your brain down, bite your tongue, and just follow the, you know, the chorus of the cult, but you used your own brain. And I think that's some really, really, really great advice. Really sad that it needs to be said in 2024, but here we are.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to open it up to the group now. I've asked everybody to turn off their cameras before because the connection was slow, but you can go ahead and turn them on now, please. I turned off some people's cameras for them too, so that was probably a bit jarring for them. But it was just being so slow. But anyway, thank you all for being here. I know I can see a couple of Canadians. Tochi is here. Rachel is here. I don't know if there are other Canadians in the group. But I could see in the comments that Tochi, for one, you were agreeing with her comments on York. I couldn't really read much more. But if you have any comments or questions for Golsa, then please go ahead and unmute yourself and let's get this conversation going.
Hey Yasmine, what's up? And Golsa, how you doing, my dear? Yeah, I was laughing at the York thing because well, I'm in Toronto, so I'm very familiar with York, and back in the day I used to be like, yo, because I went to Ryerson, so I always was like, oh man, a lot of the multicultural, the ethnic folk go to York, and I was like, man, I got to go to York and see what the ladies are saying and all that. And I ended up dating someone from York who was the epitome of this fake woke. This is anyway a little bit back, and I was like, what the hell are they? What's going on at York? Anyway, now I know. I think that to your point about how you are, deemed Islamophobic and stuff. Unfortunately, as I was saying in the chat, I just had a very recent experience with that. And it's okay. It's part of the game. You know that it's coming. And actually, I have to say one thing I really appreciate about this podcast was I didn't realize these kind of things even happened until I started to watch Yasmine's podcast. And to be honest with you, you're kind of getting off light because the truth of the matter is that a lot of people who are being, like there's a concerted effort to sue people, to really harm them, right? And so you do have to be careful out here. It's unfortunately it's just the nature of the game, and the Islamists are feeling very emboldened, and they will try to come at you. So. I think we have to, we make our criticisms and we do what we can, but we also have to just be careful. You know what I mean? And my question before I go was, I was having a conversation with a Jewish acquaintance of mine, and basically we were talking about how he feels that the West is in decline. I mean, it's very pessimistic in a way to say this, but typically when there's a decline in civilizations, there's a renaissance somewhere else. It doesn't necessarily mean that it comes right away, but there is some sort of another place where the humanists, the people who are smart and emotionally centered or whatever, they go somewhere and they thrive. So I was curious if do you know of such places so I can start like thinking about how to move there, or what's the deal?
Oh, it's interesting that you should ask that because during the Masa Amini protest, a word that was repeated a lot was cultural renaissance, and how we are just overcoming the fear of saying no to this religion and to this God and to this brutalization and all of that. And I mean, I wouldn't recommend you going to Iran, but essentially what is true is that like people who have experienced the worst of it are gonna be watchful and are gonna be warning the West and all these other countries that they should not let this happen, because I mean, like, our revolution was just less than 50 years ago, and for us, it's very fresh, and we are dealing with it every day, and we know the consequences, and we know how bad it gets. So there's no way for us to fall into that trap again. But whether or not we are going to be able to overcome this government before Iran, for example, falls apart completely is another matter, because like there's just so many things going on environmentally. Of that, like Iran is on the verge of collapse. So I can't even tell you that it's gonna be a safe haven for future, because we don't even know, as the world has let us down again. Um, but for sure, I think Middle Eastern countries are gonna wake up one after another. I don't think this is gonna last very long, and I think since 2009 to this date of well, the Arab Spring start after 2009 protests in Iran as well, and since then we are just on a road to awakening, and um, hopefully the world will listen to us and will not allow like this collapse to come to their lands and their cultures and their countries. But if it comes to it, then hopefully we have overcome our governments, so you can flee to our countries by then. Yeah.
You know, I just want to add to that, Golsa. I think that you're absolutely correct, and I agree with you. And you are seeing this renaissance around the Middle East and North Africa. I know people aren't seeing it quite yet. Those of us who are closely involved, like with my organization, Free Hearts, Free Minds, we can't keep up. We can currently now serve only 10% of the people that are on our waiting list. Like it's just it's mind-blowing how quickly the Enlightenment is reaching people. And I think that what you also said is correct about Iran started this whole thing, and Iran will end this whole thing too. You know, this whole ripple effect started with Iran when they became, you know, the first Islamic regime, and then it just spread all over Middle East, North Africa. And when Iran falls, the rest, like dominoes, will fall as well. I'm sure of it. There is such a, what you were describing in our conversation, you know, that push and pull, you know, like forcing you to wear hijab, so you rip it off your head, you know, that's happening all over. That's happening all over the Middle East and North Africa right now. The more they shove their religion down people's throats, the more that they control people with Sharia, the more people just want nothing to do with them and nothing to do with their religion. So, so yeah, I completely agree with you. And Tochi, before I let you go, I want to ask you, I don't know how, feel free to share as much as you're comfortable sharing about your own personal situation. But like Golsa said, what happened with her and every other story I've heard too of people being accused of Islamophobia, it's always a vendetta from a person who has some sort of personal grievance. Like they've got a reason, they're looking for a reason to come after you. And they know that this bludgeon of Islamophobia is a really effective bludgeon. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because they genuinely don't care. They don't actually care about Muslims. They're not actually concerned that Golsa is going to be like a security threat to the Muslim people that come into the center. No, it's just an opportunity for them to use something, just like the way that the people of Gaza are being used by Hamas, right? It's just a thing to use towards your goal. So was that something similar in your experience?
Oh, 100%. 1000%. It's always very transparent. You know, and kind of like also what I think is really interesting is it's not even like there in this program there were some Muslim participants. It's not even that I was harassing or even talking to Muslim participants at all. That's not even it. They literally, I was on Twitter, or it's like comments I made on Twitter that have nothing to do with the fellowship. They're not even
Wow.
connected. So
Same
someone just
thing.
doesn't like what I posted online and was just like, look at this type of thing. And of course, took what I said out of context because I expect that. But again, that's just how these things are. It's literal, again, it's literal sort of desecration of free speech, I would say.
Yeah.
But I, it's sad, but I expect it, and of course, one thing I will say that I think is also connected to all this is that the fellowship that I have, and I'm being vague here deliberately, obviously, but it is connected to a minority representation group of sorts, and I think this is actually sadly one of the problems with diversity and inclusion, because ultimately, I mean, I'm very for it in the sense of like we definitely need an expression of diversity and to include multiple perspectives. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of these diversity and initiatives have actually been hijacked by individuals who don't care really about diversity and inclusion at its core. It's a chance for them to actually get ahead. And ironically, they end up really just sort of entrenching and celebrating the status quo. It's really weird how this kind of stuff happens. So yeah, the long story short is I expect it. It's unfortunate. You just have to wiggle your way around it. And like I said, ultimately, it's not a big loss to me. I'll move on. But it is one of those things that
Stings.
I guess I would say at least there isn't any sort of like legal issues, and nothing legal really would come of it. But like I've seen people in Yasmine's podcast who literally have to deal with legal issues because of stuff like this, and that's where you have to be very, very careful because people are feeling empowered. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of these organizations and individuals who run them, they're I hate to say it, but you can always tell that they do lack moral courage, and like a lot of people do in general, right? There's a certain lack of moral courage, and they want to do what's easiest. And the truth is, terrorism works. People are afraid of
Mhm.
Muslims. They're afraid of anybody that's Muslim, and it's weird because it's like this fear translates into some sort of like deference and reverence almost in certain ways. And that's the sad aspect of how terrorism works, essentially.
Mhm.
But the point is, like, the stuff you're saying about, hey, you want to, hopefully people who are in that side of the world, they listen, they open up to diverse perspectives and really actually listen. The sad truth is the vast majority of them will never do it. These are not smart people. Like, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but we know this stuff. We know when we're talking to somebody who's has
A
some sort of
thinker.
intellectual capability and more importantly is not arrogant, not angry and arrogant, because it takes one person to step back and actually say, hey, I don't know everything. I could be wrong on this. Like, let me just do some digging. Because once you start to do a little bit of digging, certain things become obvious. You
For
know,
sure.
I have my position, even as somebody who I would say I'm very sort of pro-Israel, but it doesn't mean that I don't realize that it's very possible that I could be influenced by Israeli propaganda, or it's not, or that I may not know exactly what's going on in the ground in Gaza, or not know the Palestinian perspective. So I ask, I dig, and this is how I learn. But the truth of the matter is that the people who are quote unquote pro-Palestinian are not digging. They don't even care about Palestinians. They don't know them in real life. They never will know them in real life. They will never dig, and that's what you're dealing with. It's a completely different. They're completely unequal playing fields because on one side you have one group of people that actually do want to reach out and do want to learn about the other and do want to interrogate themselves and do their best, and the other side is simply not interested. They're just interested in conquest. And that's just the truth of the matter. And how do you deal with those people? I don't know. Like if I had a crystal ball, I would hope to try to figure it out. But I think for the meantime, we're just gonna have to be kind of in the trenches and just be careful. But do what we got to do. This is important work, and say what needs to be said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And Golsa, I know obviously losing your job is very detrimental. You know, there's a spectrum, right? They damage people's reputations. You know, I've known people who've had to like put their family in hiding from all of the death threats. You know, like it goes across the board. But we all have to pay a price for standing up and maintaining our integrity. And, you know, you've had to pay a high price, and thankfully it wasn't higher, but what you've had to overcome is bad enough and it should never have happened. And it's still incredibly embarrassing and angering that it would happen in Canada. But you know, sorry to use such a flippant phrase, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Like this will make you stronger, and it will also, you won't ever fall into this trap ever again. You will always keep your mind open. You're never going to be influenced by propaganda or people forcing you to think or speak in a certain way, because you're like, I'm not going through that again.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, kudos to you and your courage. But yeah, thankfully it's not worse. Okay, Hamid.
I'd like to thank you, Jasmine, for giving platform and space to brave people like Golsa. I don't believe there are many, as we all know, not many journalists, activists are ready to hear us. That's for sure. And Golsa, I'm so proud of you. You're a good example that why we call that revolution woman life freedom. That's for sure. I'm sorry about your experience at work. It's terrible. Like Jasmine said, it's part of the, price that we have to pay. But the truth is, like you mentioned, as you and I left half of my life in Iran. We lived that hellish life. And I think we have responsibility, we have duty in any way, maybe less or more, to educate people here. That's unfortunately has to be done. We're fighting in different fronts. It's not only that criminal Islamic government that is still follow us here, but even the left and liberals and others that they don't really understand what's going on. They're not ready to hear us, but we have to make them hear us for sure. I also have a question for you. I believe you haven't left Iran long ago. So what do you think about your generation in Iran? Are they, in terms of abandoning the ideology and being more or believing in human rights like you, or you think they are still influenced by different ideologies, left and others? I'd like to know your opinion on that one. And thank you again.
Thank you. I left Iran 10 years ago, but I'm very much connected with people back home, especially the past 3 years. I would say that for Iranian youth right now, it's very progressive. Like their type of thinking is very progressive, and it's not progressive the way it is here. They challenge themselves. They question media narratives. They critically think things through, because like these people have grown up learning and realizing that they cannot trust their national TV, that they cannot trust the newspapers, that they cannot trust what is being taught in schools. They cannot trust any sort of advertisement around them. So they apply that same critical thinking to wherever else, and whatever other content that they're seeing and receiving, and they analyze it based on their own experience, based on their own understanding of things. And even if they are like these, for example, like very involved in queer communities in Iran, they know what is going on here. But there is still this leftist community in Iran as well that is like, I would say, a very small group at this point. I think like they are just declining because of how out of touch with reality they tend to be. And the higher in the class you go, the more you see them. It's more like richer kids and kids who have never had to struggle with economic restrictions and things like that in order to actually understand the issue, that what is at the root of the issue. So they exist and they have their own type of thinking, very similar to the leftists here. But it's, to be honest, especially because of how much anger there is in our society and how people are forced to shut down and not say anything in their real lives, then on social media and things like that, we just do not tolerate that type of thinking and that mindset, and we, like, the Iranian kids like really aggressively shut it down, which then makes like gives room for some people to call us fascists and things like that, because we just are sick of hearing this stuff. But yes, like, and also like for myself, like my Farsi tweets very aggressive because of just the atmosphere we have, especially on Twitter. So yeah, I would say that Iranian youth are very forward thinking and they risk a lot. They really like uh take a step forward to just like dismantle those things that they have been forced into or they have been taught, and they are really open to being challenged. The media can still have an influence on a group, but the majority of them, as I see, are very, very, very smart and critical of everything, like all the narratives, even like within the opposition and within the political activists and things like that. A word they say that is a little bit sketchy, the youth like really catch it and they really know what to do with it. So they're very forward thinking, I would say.
Thank you. That's pretty much in line with what I thought that I know. And I'd like to echo what Jasmine said in her latest remark, that really I believe that this rise of Islamism, which started 1979 from Iran, will end with that too. And probably not many people still in West know the depth of the renaissance or revolution which is happening in Iran, and especially young generation. So we are very hopeful. Thank you again.
For sure. And also to pitch something in, speaking about youth, I during the protests like a couple of years ago, like we were all like, oh, we can like do something, we can like get our voices heard and things like that. So I together with like 9 other people who, like 70% of us reside in Iran and are like basically like up to age of, one of us is like about 40 years old and the rest are younger, like mostly like 90s kids and 90s and 2000s born kids. So we started a group called Waves, or it's actually like the short in Farsi, it's short for Young and Independent Iranian Freedom Fighters. And we would like talk about all these things, like talk about like what our values are and what we want like in a future Iran, and like we talked about the responsibility to protect, we talked about fascism, we talked about democracy, the importance of constitution, all these things. Like we wrote a lot of things, but I mean, it wasn't really supported because people don't really like to engage in that kind of discourse. It's mostly like people are interested in just like these short things that are like engaging in a entertainment type of way. But yeah, you can find us on Instagram if you want, and also Twitter. We had a website too, but I haven't paid for it for a while now, so it's kind of like not available. But at some point, if we are encouraged to work on it again, we will continue. But yeah, there is a lot of like things that we have written there. There's some stuff in English. Most of our things are translated in English as well. So we try to sort of like share the perspective of Iranian opposition that are younger in a way that is not really heard on the media at all.
Yeah, I think what you described there about this aversion to long form conversations or long form, readings, present company excluded, of course, but that's the biggest problem with this TikTok generation is they want everything to be in quick little fun sound bites and they want everything to be so simple and clean. And the only way you can get that is if it's simplistic and removes a lot of the context, and you can't really ever get a true understanding of anything if you're just going to be scrolling through TikTok and watching these little bite-sized videos.
Yeah.
But good for your
TikTok is
group
a hell.
for,
Thank you.
what was that?
TikTok is like a hell zone for information. Like if you go there, you're gonna come out stupider than ever. So
That's right.
yeah.
Well, see, you guys will lead the way though, right? Those of you who are not sucked into that. So that's fantastic. All right, so let's move on. Donna, you're next.
I just want to thank you both so much. This has just been a fabulous conversation. And Golsa, I am so proud to know a person of your intelligence and your commitment to yourself, and your curiosity, as you mentioned. I really lost faith that people in your generation would be so thoughtful and willing to put themselves forward like this. And my question for you is, what are your next steps and how do we follow you? Because I would like to be on the supporting end of it. I'm so taken with this conversation that we've had, and I want to see you succeed in spreading your message and encouraging other people to wake up. So that's my question. Yeah.
For me, my next steps, honestly, like I'm a little bit like up in the air myself because I feel like like when I first like started my education and stuff, I wanted to go into law and into like the Supreme Court in some way to maybe be able to challenge politicians, and because I always thought that I'm not like a politician and that's not my space to be. But now, like, I think that probably the legal industry is also taken over in a way, and it's all very much about like that bubble and what you represent. So, like, for myself, I'm just trying to figure out what path will make sense for me at this point, because after all of these experiences, after my academic experience and my life experience, I'm just like really lost, to be honest. So I'm just hoping that Iran would be free and I would go back there and do something helpful, but that I don't know when that's gonna happen. So right now I'm just trying to economically survive and then maybe follow more of my creative passions, because at least that doesn't make me as depressed, like I'm into like creative things, I'm into art and I don't know, fashion and things like that. So I'm just trying to go and like pursue those things that I always like put on a backseat because I thought I can like make change in another way. But now I'm not feeling that powerful to make that type of change. So I'm just saying to myself maybe like just like trying to survive in this world that is super not in favor of us is itself like a change of its own. So maybe I should just go with the flow and follow my guts and like things that make me happy. But yeah, in terms of following, I don't know if you meant like on social media or things like that, but I am on social media. I think like Yasmin would tag me, but I can also put my hand out there. But yeah, thank you so much for your kindness. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry if I'm a very talkative person, but I
Oh,
don't
I
talk
love it.
about these things to a lot of people. So when you open this can of worms, it's just it's a
Good.
struggle to shut it down.
Thank you so
Good.
much.
Thank you.
That's what I want. I want you to feel comfortable to finally talk, and I want you to feel like you found your safe space where you can,
Thank you.
be yourself. You made a comment about something just then that I wanted to touch on, but I forgot what it was. So Rachel, you're next. Oh, sorry, Rachel. I just remembered.
Okay.
I was gonna say, Golsa, it's okay to give yourself some time to just rest and heal, give yourself be kind to yourself. You know what I mean? Take that permission, radical self-care. You've been through a lot. You've been through lifetimes of trauma already at your tiny little age. So take some time and don't feel pressure to just move on to the next thing. You are a powerful force of nature. And when you're ready, you will get out there and you will do what needs to be done. And you're in your heart and your mind and your soul and every cell of your body, you'll know what to do. But if you're not feeling it yet, then just wait and rest until you feel it. Yeah, you're good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry, Rachel. Sorry for interrupting you. My brain
Oh,
just
no
it
problem.
was loading.
No problem at all. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Yasmine, for having these Zooms. Yeah, it's just been great to be around people who aren't so extreme in their views, and it's just like such a safe space, honestly. And yes, thank you, Golsa, for sharing. And I just want to say I'm Canadian and also Jewish, and so one thing I've noticed at a lot of the rallies for Israel is the Iranian community showing up. And there's been so many flags, and they come week after week. And I'm not even there every week, honestly. So it's just their drive and their support has been really amazing. And so because of that, I started finding more Iranian activists who obviously live in the diaspora, so they're able to speak more about everything. And yeah, it's just been really eye-opening how so much of this is connected. And so I guess one question I had is a bit more about Canada. So I'm sorry for the listeners who don't live here, is there was that I don't know what it's called, but the government passed that they're going to recognize Palestine as a state and give an arms embargo with Israel. And I'm not too sure what to think about it because, of course, at the end of the day, we all want Palestine to be free and have a state. I wonder if the timing with Hamas still in power is an issue. And also with, I don't know, with a lot of the Jewish community across Canada has been really attacked lately. A lot of protests outside schools and synagogues and JCCs and Holocaust museums. And so I'm just wondering, like, from your perspective, Golsa and Yasmine, please, I would love to hear your perspective as well, what this means for Canada. Obviously, let's be honest, Canada is pretty negligible in the geopolitics, so it doesn't affect too much in terms of like Israel's right to defend itself, but you could consider it like maybe the first domino, maybe. Anyway, I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on it, if you think it matters at all, or if it's just obviously virtue signaling. Thank you.
Yasmin, do you want to go ahead? I think like you're more of an authority on this than I am, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think, yes, Rachel, I agree. I think it's just virtue signaling. I think it's an opportunity to placate the Muslims right now in Canada who have made themselves very clear, and they are significant enough of a minority that, and also especially for the Liberal government, right? That's a voting bloc that they don't want to lose. And because of Trudeau's been very mealy-mouthed this whole time, there's been, like you talked about, there's been so many attacks on Jewish people, Jewish schools, synagogues, it's the most atrocious videos that we're seeing coming out of, a university in Montreal where a professor was telling one of his Jewish students to go back to Poland. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? Canada's got many, many problems when it comes to anti-Semitism. So I think that, like you said, selling, embargo of sales to Israel, like that's not gonna affect Israel. Canada really thinks that it's more, influential on the global scale than it really is. You're a big country, there's lots of land, but that's about it. You don't matter as much as you think you do. And secondly, yes, absolutely, there is a problem with recognizing. I mean, I don't know, when they say Palestine, what does that mean? Are they talking about Gaza right now, or are they just talking about the West Bank? I haven't looked into this. I hadn't heard about it, so I'm going to have to look into it some more. But I did hear about the arms embargo, and that was like clearly virtue signaling to me. But yeah, that's what Golsa and I were talking about with the Canadians, how quickly they linked hands with the Taliban. If that sounds like that's a very similar dynamic going on here too. You have to recognize that these are terrorists. The people of Gaza have been screaming that louder than anybody else, but nobody wants to hear them. They're like, la, 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 la. They're freedom fighters. They're revolutionaries. Like the people that are starving there and the people that are being beaten up because they're trying to get a bag of flour. You know what I mean? They're the ones that, can we hear their voices? Can we hear those authentic voices? I mean, it's literally this entire conversation with Golsa. It's the same dynamic happening over and over and over again, where it's the people from these places are trying to tell you what they think and feel, but they want so badly to fit things into their narrative and their perspective that they're willing to dismiss the voices of the people, and just so that they can continue with their own narrative.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a man from Gaza. My father is from Gaza. I'm very familiar with, my dad was like a huge peace activist in Gaza. And this is like, fighting against Hamas has been since day one. In fact, they were fighting all the way from Yasser Arafat, where they could see things were going in a really bad direction. So those voices are always ignored though, right? And so for Canada now to go ahead and legitimize Hamas, I'm going to have to look into that further, because that's just absolutely insane. But it would be not that surprising, unfortunately, because they just legitimized Taliban, they legitimized the Iranian regime. And I think that it definitely has to do with Trudeau being concerned about his votes. He was booed out of a mosque, which was beautiful. So that's the kind of thing. So he's just pandering at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
thank you
then
for that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Something just came to my mind very quickly. But unfortunately, like with politicians here, there's also a problem that like they in order to grab as many votes as they can, they just like fall all over the place. So like with the
Yeah.
conservatives right now, there's this like issue that like they are buddying up with Kurdish separators. So like it's just very weird for us because we're like, okay, we're gonna vote conservative because like IRGC and things like that need to be banned. But then they suddenly decide to like start being friends with like Komele and like the Democratic Party of Kurdistan and all these people, and like they want us separate from Iran, and they are like all about like armed resistance against Iranian occupation. And also like we see within Israeli activist communities that also has become an issue, that like some of them are raising the Kurdistan flag all of a sudden and talking about how Kurdish people also deserve their own state, which I mean like I don't really know I don't really know if like creating a state based on ethnicity is not a fascist thing to do. So like it's a little bit of a weird thing. So it's just complicated because they tend to not realize the harm they're causing to actual countries and actual people, but just like trying to get some position in power. So I think like Trudeau is on the other side of the spectrum, and then conservatives are very easy to fool as well. So it's just a politician
Yeah.
problem.
Absolutely. And Trudeau did the same thing with the Khalistanis. I mean, the largest terrorist attack in Canadian history was the Khalistani terror attack. So, and it's the exact same thing, right? They're separatists and they're happy to use violence to reach their means. It's just
For sure.
ignorance. They don't understand the dynamics and they end up backing the wrong horse.
Yeah, exactly. Just for votes, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Just for votes, it doesn't matter. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Anna, yeah, good. Anna, did you have something to say as well? Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm at work, so I'm taking a little time. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Long time admired of you and very grateful for you to do all these conversations. I can say your guest name, Gosta?
Golsa, yep.
Gosta,
Just
thank you
associated.
so much for your braveness. All of you are brave beyond my capacity to understand, and I grab so much braveness from you, and I can't say that I have gone to anything close to what any of you have gone, but even the little things in life, or even when I look at the world, learning, from so many things, I get so discouraged sometimes, and I fear for my kids. They're older, and what kind of world are they gonna face? Every time I see young people like you and anybody, just give me hope and encourage them to look at your videos, look at Jasmine's conversations. I remember I used to tell them, we used to romanticize the Moors, we used to romanticize all the Muslims, and I think there is still some truth to it. I mean, you are an example of that braveness and that passion and that courage. And but I am so grateful for not being kept in ignorance, right? We know now about so many people that we grew up. I'm Mexican, so we grew up admiring like revolutionaries like Che Guevara, some people, David Boslov, one of them were talking about Lenin, and one of my uncles was big fan of Lenin and Marx, and even I, when I was young, like Marx. And then I remember when Hamas came to power and government on Gaza. I remember some people say, that is good. They are showing to the governments, and they're showing that revolutionaries can do something. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess that means they're for the people. ignorance. And I am so grateful to Jasmine and so grateful to you that we not just know about what they're doing, but know how really it's affecting you, because so many times we are fed not just for the media, but for other experiences that we tend to see. I'm trying to find the words. We tend to see it as a general. It's just like far away.
Yeah.
But when we hear from you directly from first experience, first-hand experience, it brings us to reality as opposed to keep us on a land far away happenings, right? But I'm in Texas, so I haven't seen, I know there have been cities around me that I have seen some of the, say, pro-Palestinians, gatherings. But I don't have to be there because I can hear you, I can hear your experience, and it just tells me it's happening, and it's happening, but there are many people like you that are standing up to it, and that helps me bring brave, that helps me tell my children. It is a world there that you still can do and live and support and be brave and progress. And I'm sorry, I'm starstruck. So much to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Tochi, you're next.
Hey, what's up, Anna? Thanks for that. Shout out to Texas. I was actually gonna say in relation to that, it's really funny. I happened to be in Texas like a couple of months ago because I have family there, but I was talking to somebody who's from Cuba, and we so I was asking him, hey, what do you think about this this ongoing conflict? I already know. He's like, look, I'm so familiar with propaganda. I grew up with propaganda my entire life. I know how these Islamists do because they're friends with Castro and Maduro, and like it's all the same nonsense in the end of the day. So the truth of the matter is that while it does seem like there are a lot of us that are blinded and useful idiots, the truth is there are also a lot of people that you may not see necessarily on the street or may not even be on Twitter or whatever, but they get it, like, and they understand it. So we can't be too pessimistic.
No, for sure.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's great. That's a really good last word. Thank you so much for that, Tochi. And thank you, Anna, as well for your sharing your experience and your perspective, because that's very important. I think that you're correct that we are seeing each other as like these groups of people so far away. And that's why these narratives that Golsa was talking about, like being able to convince people that the women of Afghanistan are totally fine in their burqas and the girls are totally fine not going to school because it's their culture and this is what they want. And you sort of start to think of us as almost alien species all sharing this planet together. And we're not. We're all human beings, and we all have the same fears and dreams and joys. And women all around the world want their autonomy and their independence and their voices to be heard, and to treat us all as if we're like these caricatures that you've created of us. I mean, Golsa, you said it so correctly. Like they want a diversity of skin color, not a diversity of ideas, not a diversity of voices. And they will silence us if we are speaking out of turn because they just want you to stand there and be refugee Golsa, and that's it. So it's really important, Anna, that you brought up some perspectives from your own experiences, talking about Che Guevara and all that, and exactly what you were saying as well, Tochi, speaking about Cuba, this is universal. It's just humans. This is what human beings do. They try to use others so that they can get power. They use propaganda. They play whatever games that they need to play so that they can get the power for themselves. Hamas never cared about Palestinians, never cared about Gazans. All they ever cared about was killing Jews and getting rid of Israel as a country and maintaining control of that land. And after they're finished killing off all the Jews, they're going to spread around to Europe and to America. That not just them, but all of them, right? Whether it's the Islamic regime who funded them, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Boko Haram, whether it's Al-Qaeda, whether it's ISIS, they're all the same. They've all got their global caliphate hopes. And it's very frustrating when people just take a look at this one situation and then they start to think they're not expanding their view and realizing that not only is this across Middle East and North Africa, this is across the world, because we're at the end of the day all human beings. So after my rant is over now, Golsa, I want to give you the last word before we conclude this conversation. Is there something that you want to leave everybody with?
No, I think like your words are as good as mine, and yeah, I just hope that people are not too afraid of being challenged and questioning themselves. I always do, and it's scary, but it's also a part of being human. So we can just try to learn things, because no one is supposed to be an expert on everything. But if you willingly shut yourself off from knowledge, then you're doing yourself a disservice. So
Yeah, beautifully said. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Christopher Hitchens. I don't know, but I love the quote that said, "As soon as you say I know, you're stopped learning. You've shut your mind down." And that's something I've always kept with me, because of course, as a Muslim, you have such moral certitude, right? You know everything.
yeah.
And so I never want to feel that kind of certitude ever again. Like, I'll always keep my mind open to different perspectives. So thank you, Golsa. You're absolutely correct. And that was wonderful advice for everybody. And thank you all for joining us. I'm going to share the comments with you here, Golsa, because there have been lots of questions and lots of really beautiful comments for you. So I'll share the conversation just in case you haven't had a chance to read it all. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good day.
See you later. Thank you, Golsa. Bye.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.